There is a particular kind of quiet that happens when you walk into a forest or even just stand near a large old tree in a park, and something in your chest loosens. You were not aware that your shoulders were raised until they dropped. You were not aware that your breathing was shallow until it deepened on its own. Nobody told you to relax. The tree did not do anything. It simply stood there, the way it has been standing there for decades, and somehow that was enough. If you have felt this, you are not imagining it, and you are not alone in it. What we are talking about today is something researchers and psychologists have been quietly studying for a while now. The effect that trees, canopy, and natural overhead cover have on the human nervous system. The way that being under or near large trees tends to produce a measurable, almost immediate shift in how people feel inside. Some call it the overstory effect, referring to that upper layer of a forest where the tall trees live. And understanding why it happens tells us something genuinely interesting about who we are and what our minds are still quietly reaching for. The pattern itself is simple enough to name. People feel calmer, safer, and more emotionally regulated when they are near large trees or beneath a natural canopy. The shift can happen quickly, sometimes within minutes. It tends to reduce the sense of mental noise. It tends to soften whatever tension a person was carrying without them necessarily deciding to let it go. It is involuntary, which is part of what makes it so striking. The body just responds. To understand why, it helps to think about where the human nervous system came from. We spent an extraordinarily long stretch of our evolutionary history in environments full of vegetation, shade, varied terrain, and the ambient sounds of the natural world. Our threat detection systems, our stress responses, our sense of safety, all of it developed in that context. The built environment we live in now is historically very new. Glass and concrete and fluorescent light are not things our nervous system has had much time to adapt to. In a deep sense, our biology is still oriented toward a much older world. Evolutionary psychologists have explored this through what is sometimes called the biophilia hypothesis, a term most associated with the naturalist E.O. Wilson. The basic idea is that humans have an innate tendency to affiliate with other living systems, that we are drawn to life, to growing things, to natural complexity, not as a preference we learned, but as something more fundamental than that, something woven into the structure of how we experience the world. Trees, and particularly large, mature trees, tend to activate a specific kind of response in the human nervous system. There is research in environmental psychology, including the well-known work of Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, suggesting that natural environments support what they called restorative attention. The idea is that there are two modes of attention. One is directed attention, the kind you use at work, in traffic, when you are solving a problem or managing something complex. That kind of attention is effortful and it depletes. The other is involuntary attention, the soft, wandering, undirected noticing that gets triggered by things like moving water, fire, clouds, and trees. Natural environments are full of stimuli that draw this second kind of attention, and because it requires no effort, it allows the directed attention system to rest and recover. Being near trees, especially under a canopy, tends to pull you into that softer mode almost automatically. Your eyes find the movement of leaves. Your ears pick up wind or birdsong. Your visual field fills with complex fractal-like patterns that research suggests the brain finds genuinely pleasing to process. All of this is happening beneath the level of conscious thought. And there is something more. The parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you that handles rest and recovery, tends to become more active in natural settings. Studies measuring things like heart rate, cortisol levels, and blood pressure have generally found that time in nature, and forests in particular, supports a shift away from the sympathetic state that most of us spend the majority of our waking hours in. That tightly wound, ready for something state, the state that feels so normal we forget it is not the only option. From the inside, this can feel like a kind of permission. People who spend time under trees often describe it not as feeling happy exactly, but as feeling less pressed upon. Like the mental list of things to handle has not gotten shorter, but it has moved further away for a moment. There is something about the scale of an old tree, the way it has simply been there across decades of human drama and change, that makes a person's own urgency feel slightly less absolute. Not diminished exactly, but held in a wider frame. Some people notice they think more clearly after a walk among trees. Not because the trees solved anything, but because the noise settled enough for the person's own thoughts to become audible again. Others notice that emotions they had been compressing all day become accessible in a quieter way. A sadness they could not quite reach while sitting at a desk becomes something they can feel and name and gently move through in the presence of something old and unhurried. Children often feel this without any framework for it at all. They are just drawn to trees, to climbing them, to sitting beneath them, to hiding in them. The instinct runs early and runs deep. So here is the gentle shift this offers. If you find yourself drawn to trees, to parks, to wooded paths, to even just sitting near a single large tree in an urban space, that is not an eccentricity or a way of avoiding things. It is your nervous system doing something quite intelligent. It is reaching for an environment that it knows, on a very old level, how to rest in. You are not escaping when you go there. In many ways, you are returning to something. You do not have to live near a forest for this to matter. Research suggests that even brief exposure to natural elements, even looking at trees through a window or spending 10 minutes in a park, can shift the physiological and psychological state in meaningful ways. The dose does not have to be large. The effect tends to begin quickly. And if you find yourself noticing that you feel worse when you go long stretches without any contact with natural spaces, that is worth taking seriously as information about what your nervous system needs, not as a weakness or a preference you should override. As always, what is offered here is general insight into human experience, and it is no substitute for working with a therapist or mental health professional if you are navigating something difficult. But there is something quietly reassuring in knowing that the pull you feel toward trees, toward that particular hush, that loosening in the chest, is not arbitrary. It is ancient. It is shared across humans in ways that cut through culture and generation. Something in you already knows how to be calmed by the presence of something that simply grows and breathes and stays. The tree does not ask you to be productive. It does not ask you to explain yourself. It has been growing for longer than most of our worries have existed, and it will keep growing after them. There is a rest available in that if you let yourself receive it. If any part of this felt true for you, there is a free reflection worksheet linked below. A few quiet questions to carry with you the next time you find yourself near something green and growing. And if this channel feels like the kind of place you want to return to, subscribing means you will find it again when you need it. Take care of yourself tonight.